All right, friends. Well, this is so cool. This is our beta podcast test.
Yeah, beta time.
Yeah, beta time. We are exploring the idea of recording a podcast to share and process some information. And I'm here with my really good friend Tom. Um, and I'm grateful. I'm really grateful that we're doing this on the Thursday morning, and the weather's right and the vibes are right. And yeah, thanks for having me over.
Yeah, fantastic, and I feel that same gratitude. Really appreciate the chance to explore these ideas with you, put them out there, but also, if the concept works, create a space where we can bring other people on, and just sort of in a very authentic and generative way, kind of dig into this confluence of yoga and school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So those are some of the ideas. I come from a yoga and counseling background, and I've been doing that for the better part of 15 years, probably more. And I'm now bringing that forward to help people in their international school space, and it's been really exciting this last several months. And that's where Tom came in. He brought me over to that space. So what?
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, so I've been involved in education my entire adult life, right? As a high school English teacher and coach, kind of the classic trajectory. Principal, was head of school in a couple places, and now head of secondary at International School in Houston. And you know, in my later life, when I came to Houston, really kind of had been practicing yoga, but it kind of did a dive into it, and through that, was fortunate enough to kind of intersect Bhavin at the studio, was his student, and that just sort of led to us talking, exploring ideas, and ultimately, yeah, you being willing to come over to the school and bring some new ideas into the space, and open up some new pathways for us. So I'm super appreciative.
Yeah, likewise. It felt really organic the way that all unfolded. And I'll always look back at that time in my life and remember that pivot, that moment where you said, "Hey, can we bring this to the school?" I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely."
yeah.
Um,
So what is, yeah, when we say bring this to the school, what does that mean to you?
for me, what I was doing at the time, I think the thing that I remember at that time, for me specifically, was I was creating a class on the Thursday night that was high on the vibes, high in the restorative and introspective healing vibes that you could have in a yoga space. And it was very inclusive and welcoming. And I, I did that with live music and, just lighting and just ambiance. And I would like to think, and maybe you can confirm this now, like, you were experiencing that. You're like, hey, I don't know what this is exactly, but if you could bring this to my school, I'd love to see what that could look like. Is that?
Yeah, that's 100% it, because I started attending that class regularly. And I think what struck, well, so it was Thursday night and it was later, right? So I would honestly, it just would kind of either anchor my week or start out the week. I'm not exactly sure, but I really built it into my life. But the thing that struck me about it was kind of the plus value, the additive piece that, yeah, okay, we were in a yoga studio and we were doing a yoga class, but there was this whole other dimension that you were sort of pushing into that was super creative, super human,
Mm.
and that's what got me thinking. And because in school we're trying to do the same thing. I mean, school is school, and we're in a very intense environment, very achievement oriented environment. And how can we do all that? That's all well and good, but can we do that in a way that's creative, artistic, and human? I think that's really the question for me. It kind of takes you to this place of, you know, excellence, achievement, and wellness, right? That is a big deal. And I think it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal for lots of reasons that we're going to go into, I think, in the
Yeah,
pod.
absolutely. That's well said. It's such an interesting thing when you have what I'm experiencing from the outside as I've come into the school space is this machine, for lack of a better word, that's trying to output successful academic students.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'll use the metaphor of a jet engine sometimes, where when we get everything going, it's very intense, right? And I think it's intense for kids that are in pre-K3 and pre-K4, let alone high school, right? And I've watched that over time, watched that space change,
Hmm.
all kinds of factors. But and I think that, you know, we're our school also, all schools have great adults in them, caring adults in them, great kids, great parents, but it's that intensity factor and how you manage it, I think is really important. And that at some point, um, you have to rest, you have to recover, you have to get centered, and some of these other ideas. And that's what I wasn't seeing so much, or that's what I wasn't feeling. And it just got me thinking about, okay, well, how can we do that? And we're not going to change everything, and I'm not looking to change everything, but what I am trying to do is explore ways we could give our students, give our families some tools and some strategies for them to deal with all of the challenges that are going to be coming in their life. Like, I don't think life's going to get easier, in the future, but our life is also beautiful, and there's so much power and potential there. So yeah, 100%. That's what it was.
To kind of reflect on that a little bit, with a lifetime career in schools, independent schools around the world, is the intensity that you are referring to unique to the situation of this school here in Houston?
No, I don't think. I mean, I don't think so. Because I have been in a lot of other places besides Houston. I've kind of worked in 9 or 10 different countries, different kinds of school configurations, and I think what I've seen is just, a gradual, you know, increase or trajectory of intensity, right? Just in the school space. What's expected, what's the norm, what's the baseline. So, to put some flesh on that bone, my first job in the IB program, which I think is the, kind of the gold standard for curriculums in the world. I was an IB English teacher in Sao Paulo, Brazil, back in the 80s. And, at that time, if you got the IB diploma, if you earned 24 points, 24 out of a possible 45, that was an amazing accomplishment. You got a year of college, right? Um, run the tape forward to now, and that's not happening anymore, right? And our kids are, 24, just barely earning it is really honestly seen as, not a great accomplishment anymore. So that's just in my lifetime, I think a pretty major shift. I think the other thing is, what the college admissions process, the university admissions process, at least in our school, and all the pressures of that. And, that's obviously the next step for our students, right? They're going to graduate from our school and go on to that next step. So, yeah, obviously we have to be aligned with that, have to be competitive in that space. But it just seems to be growing in terms of the footprint that it puts on the educational experience. And I think that creates a lot of stress
Mm.
for our young people. And it always works itself out, but it just seems harder and harder to get it worked out. And then you wonder, okay, is there an end to that road, right? Like, what is out there?
Mhm.
And that sort of cycles you back around to maybe not, but at least if we can help the students generate, have some tools
Yeah.
and strategies, then I think that that's part of our responsibility as educators.
Right, right. And I think that's where the yoga piece comes in, or I'd like to kind of maybe zoom out a little bit on that and say mindfulness in general.
Yeah. And that's obviously part of your class and your teaching, and that's one of the pieces, I think the early pieces that we brought into the Audi experience, trying to kind of reorganize something that we were doing, but put a different lens on it, a different slant on it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Like
don't, if you
just
want to talk about that life skills class. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the early days we were interjecting literally into the jet engine some fresh oil, so right, that wasn't hot,
Yeah.
you know, and it kind of, I'd like to believe it worked. It helped cool it down a little bit.
Yeah, and so, what that looked like for us anyway is our ninth graders have a class we call life skills, and the traditional curriculum has been, well, we explore things that they need to know in life, and it's gone through different iterations. And back in the old days, it was probably like, how do I get a library card, and how do I have, how do I have friends, and how do I meet people,
Yeah.
things like that. But it was always to me a little bit canned, right, and not really ultimately getting at what we needed to do. And so what I asked Bobbin to do this year was, hey, when we say, hey, can you bring this? That was one of the entry points for the mindfulness, the yoga ideas, the centering, circle time. And, but that first piece, the ninth graders, they were expecting that sort of formulaic, not very authentic experience where they would, they'd go to class because they had to. And most of them would probably just turn their brain off or, do their homework on the side. And we sort of started going down this other road that I knew a lot of students would be interested in, but I also knew not everybody would be. And I kind of remember those early days, it looked like you kind of pulled a tour in Vietnam or something by the end of the week, right?
Yeah,
Because it was, ninth grade boys and whatnot. And also early on, the tension between those that really wanted to, and then maybe those that weren't quite ready for it yet. And then that, so we kind of worked through that in term one, and then we kind of made that shift for term two. And I think that was a big deal.
absolutely. Yeah. So my experience is, and I'm coming in as a counselor, working with the upper school division of school, and I'm their counselor. And part of the job requirement, for lack of a better word, is that you have to teach these sections of life skills, right? So, okay. So my thing is, all right, well, I'm going to teach them meditation, yoga, uh, authentic communication, authentic relating activities. I don't allow phones in there. And then I've just increased the sensory thing. So I have this beautiful fuzzy rug, and they just take their shoes off, and you can see when they hit that sucker, they're just decompressing and unwinding, and they just love it. And then we're playing games, we're talking about things, we're processing their struggles, their stresses that they have in their lives, and it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Now that we filtered out some of the people who did not want to be there, I gave them choice whether they said, a lot of them would say that they have a high or heavy workload, which is a very common thing to say at our school. They had the choice to go work on their schoolwork. Now that's great. Now they basically have an extra period of time to go work on their stuff to stay ahead or get ahead or catch up. And it helps them feel less stress. So that's one chunk of students. And the rest of them are with me, and we're playing games, and they're asking me questions. I think one of the things that I've loved the most, though, is developing relationships with the kids. Now they know me.
Exactly. And that, as the school counselor, that's one of the biggest challenges is like, yeah, sometimes there's stigma around seeing the counselor, right? And I think you've been great at sort of just, ripping that down. And, we had a great setup already with Miss Penny, but, I think you've really pushed into that space. And yeah, the idea is that, okay, this year you're working with this year's ninth graders, and then you kind of know them all by the end of that term one at some level. And then you know as we said, some opted out, and then the ones that stayed in, and it was what, 40, 60, a lot more stayed in than I thought would,
Yeah.
which was great. Those guys really well. You're going to still know them next year when they're
Hmm.
10th graders,
Hmm.
and then boom, another ninth grade. And so over a relatively short window of time, you really are building this just personal connection with all the kids, and that's part of one of our our mantras. We want that 1+1+1+1. One of those ones is we want every student to feel like they've got an adult that they can talk to.
Yeah.
That's key to us, right?
Yeah, I think we've definitely achieved that with this group. I mean, I'm getting visits throughout the week. People are coming in.
Yeah,
Students are coming in and opening up,
yeah,
sharing,
yeah.
being vulnerable, expressing things that they're being challenged with. And it's been really rewarding. It's been really beautiful and fruitful to see. So I'm able to do my one-on-one work really powerfully with them as a result of the life skills class, and then share the tools with the bigger group, and that's been really awesome.
Yeah, I had the privilege of just kind of watching that whole thing unfold last week, right? We had been talking about something, and then the bell changed, and one of those groups came in, and I was just sort of sitting on that rug, and what I loved watching was the students came in, and some of them, yeah, they needed to do their, they needed to do their work. And so they would just kind of point to that study room, no asking permission or all this other kind of stuff that we have in school, but just a hey. And I think just them being able to do that is huge, right? Like true choice, pure choice for kids is not necessarily something they have a lot of, right?
Right.
They got a lot of pseudo choice sometimes, but like, yeah, okay, hey, it's a small thing, but it is within your control. Like, hey, do you really want to allocate your time to this? It's okay. Or you want to be here, and just how fluid that was. That's what I really loved. I mean, I think that the highest functioning teachers, the highest functioning classrooms have these routines that are really implicit in the space. They're clear, but there's not a lot of energy trying to force it,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I love. It's just like boom. And even like I saw them get the dopamine hit, seeing you, being able to choose,
Yeah.
or coming in and sitting down. Like I saw them get it, and I'm getting it. I'm just like, yeah. And that moment of just sort of, it's not a fancy moment, right? But it's an important moment, and I think that's the dark side of the achievement deal, right? Is that a
Yeah.
lot of achievement comes without much vulnerability, right?
Ugh.
There's almost like everybody has to put on a mask, everybody has to adopt a persona, everybody's got to do something for somebody else, like,
Mhm.
okay, what does Harvard want me to do? Or what does my club soccer team want me to do? Or what does Mr. Oden want me to do? And it's like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Like, can we create spaces where that, there's a safe choice to be made? Um, and just that thing itself is a really important part of it. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it's big.
No, I really appreciate you seeing that. That's beautiful. I think I'm gonna take that as a success,
Yeah, you
a
should.
win,
Yeah.
in a sense, because that is what's happening. Kids,
Touchdown.
yeah, kids come in and they make that choice organically. I remember a boy. He's really a good student and he's an awesome kid. He's so friendly and so polite. And he came in yesterday, and normally he goes to work. And yet yesterday he came in. He's like, I have a lot of work, but I heard that we're doing an activity from the other sections that I want to do.
Yeah.
And so he decided to stay, and we had a great time.
Yeah.
We had a great time.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you get the props in the student space, then you know you're on your way.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
on your way. And
absolutely.
all, just even unpacking that, where sometimes that work that kids have to do and the pressure that they feel around it, the mental part about that, the emotional part of that, is sometimes much more domineering and dominant than the actual like cognitive task,
Hmm.
right? And so they burn a lot of mental energy worrying about what they're ultimately going to do. Perfectionism comes into it, and that's not healthy, right? And I guess that's leading me to another thing that I really like about what you're doing, is just the physicality of it, right? In most schools and most learning organizations, we live in our head all the time, right? And even when we're listening to people talking, we're talking at the same time ourselves. And ultimately, yeah, it's like, the memory bank gets too full, right? The brain gets too full. And so that ability just to, in that yoga thing, yeah, just, mountain pose. I'm just standing there with my feet on the ground and breathing and just engaging the basic aspect of my humanity, right? And we're not doing it all day long,
Yeah,
but just even doing it for 5 seconds,
yeah.
10 seconds is huge. And I've heard you talk about that with the students, about just taking a moment to reset your nervous system,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, you
Hmm.
want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's a big one, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm gonna kind of rewind a little bit on this aspect of it. I've been going through a physical health journey myself, and what I learned through my own research and having a medical background, medical family, really deep went into the deep dive section of like, how do I understand what's going on with me from a medical physiological perspective, and how do I heal it? And I love that. I'm a kind of a I'm really like, I guess I'm really passionate about learning how to do things myself,
Yeah,
and learning how to heal myself was is definitely a part of that. I don't necessarily subscribe to the allopathic medical system that we have in place right now, the way that they're just trying to prescribe stuff. So, like, what's the root cause? And the root cause for my condition that I had or have is nervous system burnout, nervous system complete, just like toast. You can imagine something sizzling because it's
yeah,
engaged in the fight, flight, or flights mode all the time. Well, our nervous system is designed to protect us from dangers. If we were being chased by a tiger, we lock in and we find the exit path. We know how to do that. But
right,
guess what? There's no tigers in Houston. Like, we're
right.
not.
Yes.
But our stress levels are even higher.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you look at any medical journal right now, they'll tell you that stress is comorbid with 90 to 95% of disease,
yeah.
which is to say, another way of saying stress is intertwined in all of disease right now, and it's making it worse.
Right.
So we have a major problem with stress.
Yeah. Kind of stress load, right? Because I mean, I think some stress is required for growth and for learning and for evolving, but
Hmm.
then when you get overloaded, I think that's when the system shuts down. And we saw that a lot. I think, it's always been there, but in the pandemic especially, there was a lot of, in the academic journals, a lot of discussion of, I mean, the technical term was allostatic loading, right? That, like, we got in the pandemic, and even though we were home, the fact that we were on Zoom, the fact that we were separated, the fact that we weren't doing our normal routines, was adding basically just this continual stress scenario on our students and on our teachers. And that kind of thinking about that was part of this road that we're on right now, is like, hey, got to bring that load down, because
Hmm.
it's not healthy, and
Right.
it's not ultimately effective, and it's for sure not efficient, but most importantly, it's not healthy. Like, what's more important than your health, your
Absolutely.
physical health, your emotional health, your mental health.
There
And that's
is
where
no,
yoga gets good there, right?
yeah.
Because they got a lot on that.
Right, for sure. So I agree with that. There's nothing that's more important than our physical health. You can have all the money or wealth in the world, but if you don't have the health to enjoy it, what's the purpose? What's the
Yeah,
point?
yeah,
You can't, enjoy it. And so it also extends to the learning environment. If you're too stressed, you can't learn and retain and attend and apply. So the mind is really interesting. It works. It's in yoga, or in the East, they talk about the mind as the monkey mind, and it just goes and goes and goes. It doesn't know how to stop. And we have to interject spaces and pauses. Yoga, mindfulness in general, are tools to pause the monkey mind. And when you pause the mind, you'll realize just for a moment that your mind is always going and it's always telling you a story about something. And it's so nice to pause and realize that for a second.
yeah.
And one of the easiest ways that we can do that is just take a moment right now, wherever you are, if you're listening, listen for the furthest sound that you can hear that's not in your room. And take a breath. Inhale. Slow exhale. And we'll go into more of those tools, but for example, what did you notice whenever we listened for the furthest sound?
Yeah, well, what I was noticing was there's some highway sound. I wasn't exactly sure if it was in front of me or behind me. It was almost like around me, but sort of some white noise of the highway. And then yeah, so then that gets you into, it's always there, kind of where we're located,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of systems that block it out, all that kind of stuff you were talking about before. Well, don't need to know about the highway because I got to know about the tiger. But it's out there. And to some extent, it was peaceful just to, yeah, it's out there.
Take a moment.
Yeah, it's like, where am I? Where am I
Yeah.
in this world, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, what I'm reaching for there is that we're turning the mind and thoughts off,
yeah,
and we're tapping into our sensory ear hearing experience. And by doing that job of turn on your ears and listen for a second, you turn off your thoughts and you give your nervous system and your brain some respite, some a break, a pause, just for a second to be in a sensory experience. That's one of the most effective and easy ways to stop thinking for a second.
yeah,
Feel what are your toes touching? What does the chair feel like under your seat? What's the fabric feel like on your skin that you're wearing, right? Or do you feel humidity on your nose and cheeks like I do right now, or is, what can you feel? um, what can you hear? What can you touch? So in the stressful machine that is the jet plane flying all day, if we can give ourselves a break for a second, it allows us to be more sustainable, to be more efficient, to learn better, and to have better relationships because we're not stressed out.
right. I think another piece to tie to that too is when we say, turn your thoughts off. I think, and we'll, down the road, we'll do some deep dives into this, but you know, kind of the reality of the world that young people live in today, brought by the iPhone digital revolution, right? And the fact that a lot of those thoughts that they are having are, sort of, you know, Instagram fantasy kind of things, right? Where they're comparing their normal, you know, young adult self to these idealized versions all the time, right? So it's not just that they're thinking all the time, but a lot of times they're doing this mimetic comparative thinking that's not healthy for them either, right? It's really attacking their agency. And I think it took us a while to get there, but that seems to be the increasingly dominant perspective uh, of educators now. More and more, it's almost like going up at a exponential level. Before the phone was, oh, this is a cool tool and it's nice. Now you have wait till eighth. don't even give a young person an iPhone until 8th grade. A lot of schools saying no iPhones. And I think the reason that they're doing that is, it's distracting, but it's destructively distracting, right? Probably distraction of any kind isn't great, but it's this comparative, I don't measure up, or oh, that's more beautiful than I am, or that's a better athlete than I am, or that's a better car than I'll ever own. Man, that's not healthy for anybody, right? But those things are designed to keep you hooked in there, right? And so a space where, like, you started back, no phones, and more teachers in our school, we have in every room we have the pouch, and we've left it sort of for the teachers to manage, but we're probably getting to a place, and this is hard because there's so many positive things about technology, but you know, the trade-off, I think, is becoming more and more clear to us. And so
Yeah.
that's all wound around that. And again, the turning off your thoughts, getting out of your head, um, has that dimension of it too for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for a moment, we find the data is very clear in the mindfulness tools when they're applied, how it improves our health, our well-being, our ability to learn and grow and help. And so, yeah, that's really powerful. The whole phone tech conversation is a deep one. It's a big
It
one.
is a big
And it's
one.
charged right now too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no pun intended in the sense that, but that's something that we're going to need to unpack.
W-
And
Yeah.
for sure. I'd love to thank our listeners for being with us on this first episode, and we just basically kind of touched on a couple of things.
Yeah.
And I think that the vision that we're having is that we're going to go further on all of these topics as school and mindfulness kind of cross pollinate each other and how they work, how they can work together.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we're gonna have comments, right? So
Yeah.
people could send
Yeah,
us, hey,
sure.
if something's vibing for you,
Yeah.
let us know if there's something that you'd like to talk about. And can I set up one of the next ones we'll do? I just got to
Absolutely.
grab something. Let me
Yeah,
grab
yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're going to go hear this guy talk next week,
Oh yeah.
David Yeager. He wrote the book 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People. And a lot of the ideas in this text connect to a lot of the things that we're talking about. So in a future one, yeah, we'll kind of share that experience with you. But he's based up in Austin. But he's come to Houston to speak next Tuesday night. So we're taking a bunch of people over there because he's got some very interesting ideas about, what is, there's a lot of young people this, young people that, a lot of frustration and doom and gloom sometime. And I'm not in that space, but, he's the academic researcher and has some, interesting and also actionable approaches. So in a future pod, we'll talk about David Yeager and all the other kind of stuff we're talking about.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thank you, friends. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Okay. Peace and love.
Peace and love.